Mexico can be called a land of contrast. Great differences can be seen in the scenery of the country, and even greater differences can be seen in the people and the way they live. Above all, Mexico is a contrast between the old and the new. Perhaps this is most noticeable when one looks at the architecture and the buildings seen in this great land. Here in Mexico City is the University of Mexico. Although it is the oldest university in America, the buildings are modern and beautifully designed. To this great university come students from all over the world. Everywhere one goes, the presence of the early Spanish explorers is felt. Here, in the city of Zacatecas, is an ancient aqueduct which is still being used to bring life-giving water into the city for use by its people. In the valley of Cholula, we see an early Christian church standing upon a high hill. And for hundreds of years, the people of this valley have come here to worship. But long before this church was built, hundreds of thousands of people worshipped here. For the hill you see is the remains of an ancient Indian temple, the largest man-made pyramid in the entire world. Everywhere in the land of Mexico, you see this contrast. Modern buildings standing amidst much older buildings of another age. And here and there, beneath an old Spanish cathedral, buried under a canopy of jungle landscape, or resting beneath the busy streets of a modern city, one sees the ruins of a civilization older, much older than ours. Los Viejos, the ancient ones who lived here thousands of years before the Spanish arrived. Whom were they? Where did they come from? What happened to them? No one knows for certain, but they are an important part of the contrast that is Mexico. Indeed, these early civilizations of the Americas constitute a great contrast with those of its later inhabitants. But even more interesting than the contrast are the puzzling questions raised by a study of these early Americans. For, as stated in the World Book Encyclopedia, no one knows where the Indians came from or how long he has inhabited this continent.
This statement is indicative of the great number of riddles that surround the American Indian. Let us journey for a few moments into America's past as we examine some of these riddles uncovered by the archaeologists in their search for understanding, and listen to their testimony concerning the people of America's prehistory. As we look across the great ball court in the city of Chichen Itza and gaze over the homeland of the ancient Maya civilization, one pauses to consider the prime riddle of all: whence came these ancient people? Most archaeologists agree that the Indian did not originate in America, but traveled here from some other land. Herbert J. Spinden, in his book Ancient Civilizations of Mexico and Central America, states, with their calendarial system already in working order, the Mayas appear on the threshold of history 600 years before the Christian era. The commonly accepted viewpoint of our day is that these people migrated from Asia across the frozen Arctic wastelands and then spread slowly southward throughout the Americas. But as one considers the evidence being gathered today, the origin of the Indian seems an unsearchable riddle. Contrary to the accepted theory of gradual and independent development in the New World, the noted archaeologist A. Hyatt Verrill elaborates on the puzzle of their origin as he states of these early Americans,
"They appear to have sprung into full bloom, so to speak, overnight. There are not, so far as is known, any remains of preliminary steps or beginnings to show a gradual evolution or building up, nor any evidence to lead us to assume that the results were the culmination of slow improvement through many centuries. Rather, it was an abrupt and entirely revolutionary order of things, exactly as though the laws, customs, arts, sciences, industries, and social organization of the new regime had been brought, ready-made and fully developed, from another sphere or unknown land."
This beautifully constructed observatory in the city of Chichen Itza shows us the heights of knowledge and science brought to the New World by these early settlers. Everywhere one sees evidence of their high degree of culture, civilization, and craftsmanship. Here, in the city of Mitla, one sees the great skill shown by their artisans. Many of the rooms here are inlaid with stones cut so precisely that they are fitted into place without benefit of mortar to make the intricate designs seen here. While our ancestors lived in rude huts and dressed themselves with the skins of animals, craftsmen of these ancient cities worked all manner of precious stone and metal. From the ruins at Monte Alban come these beautiful works in alabaster, turquoise, coral, and gold. The high degree of development of these people is apparent. The puzzling aspect of their highly developed culture is that it seems to have arrived here fully blossomed out. As a matter of fact, states one writer, the oldest cities are the most perfect. As one reconsiders the commonly accepted theories as to the origin of the Indian, this observation poses a riddle of immense proportions. Equally puzzling to the proponents of the theory that America was peopled by a gradual diffusion of nomadic hunters from Asia are the numerous similarities one finds between the cultures of America and those of the Mediterranean area. So evident are these similarities that one distinguished scholar, Zelia Nuttall, made this statement of belief: America must have been periodically colonized by the voyages of Mediterranean seafarers. Consider, for example, the great similarity in the construction of pyramids in the Americas and in Egypt. Here we see a typical step pyramid of Egypt. Notice how each step of the structure is inset as it rises skyward. Now, here in Yucatan, as elsewhere in Central America and Mexico, one sees similar step pyramids, constructed by people who seem to have been acquainted with the great pyramids of the Nile Delta. Atop these great pyramids was usually a small temple, similar to those on the great and ancient ziggurats of Babylonia. There were scholars who maintained that the similarity between Egyptian and American pyramids was only a superficial likeness. They argued that the real purpose of the Egyptian pyramid, to serve as a place of burial, was unknown in the Americas. Here, in the city of Palenque, this argument was silenced in 1949. In that year, a Mexican scholar, Alberto Ruz, discovered a hidden stairway in the floor of the temple atop the large pyramid in the background. This stairway led downward through the pyramid to a beautiful room beneath the ground level. Here was found a large stone box, which was used just as in Egypt, as a place of interment for an important person of the Maya past. In the jungle of Central America stands the beautiful Maya city of Copan. Here was a city which reminded archaeologists of yet another Bible-land culture. G. Elliott Smith, speaking of the jungle-covered structures of Copan, gives us this comparison. In the first place, it must not be forgotten that these stelae at Copan were erected within walled courts and in close association with great pyramidal structures of a very distinctive type. Pyramids presenting similarly peculiar features were being built in Mesopotamia as long as 2400 B.C., and in association with these Babylonian monuments were walled courts, just as at Copan. High in the Andes Mountains of South America flourished the mighty empire of the Incas. These people also possessed many similarities in common with the Mediterranean peoples. The noted archaeologist A. Hyatt Verrill discusses a few of these.
There are many culture features of the Sumerians and the Peruvians. No other race in America used the plow and the wide-bladed, short-handled hoe exactly like the ancient Sumerian implements. In no other portion of the Western Hemisphere did the Indians use the biblical type of sling. In addition, the Incas used a peculiar form of wooden shield exactly like the shields of Asia Minor. No one comparing photographs of the two can believe that they were merely a coincidence, that the two races, separated by thousands upon thousands of miles of ocean, could have chanced upon the unique type of masonry, so identical in every respect that the structures in Peru and those in Asia Minor might well have been planned and erected by the same artisans.
From time to time there have come to light in the Americas strange inscriptions such as these found on a large boulder in New Mexico. Strange because they are inscriptions written in Semitic languages, Hebrew, Canaanite, and Phoenician. Concerning one such inscription found in Brazil, a professor of Mediterranean languages at Brandeis University in Massachusetts states, "The linguistic oddities that have cast suspicion on the text actually support its genuineness. No forger who knew enough Semitics to compose such a document would have committed so many apparent errors. Now that nearly a century has passed, it is obvious that the text is genuine, because subsequently discovered Phoenician, Ugaritic, and other Northwest Semitic inscriptions confront us with the same errors." Such Mediterranean influences is abundant in the New World. Here we stand amid the ruins of the ancient city of Mycenae. This civilization flourished in the Mediterranean area 2,000 years before the Christian era began. As one observes the great arched doorway, it is impossible not to recall hundreds of identical passageways seen in a land thousands of miles from the Aegean Sea. For this is the arch used by the Maya of Central America. Throughout their ancient domain one sees identical ceilings, doorways, and passages. Lacking a keystone, the arch gradually sets inward as it rises to a pinnacle and is covered by a final piece of stone laid over the apex. Separated by thousands of miles of oceans, these two cultures employed the same style of building. Let us return to Egypt for a few more cultural similarities between the Old World and the New. Before us is the Ankh, a sacred emblem of the Egyptians, symbolic of life. This symbol was known and used throughout the world of ancient Asia Minor. It generally consists of a cross with a simple ring above it. As one journeys in the Americas, it is with surprise that the same symbol is found. Here, carved on a rock at Pipestone, Minnesota, is a replica of the ancient Egyptian Ankh. Near Toluca, Mexico, one sees the large foundation of a structure that can only be an enlarged duplicate of the same Ankh, sign of life and immortality to the ancient Egyptians. When the archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann was excavating the ancient Mycenaean cities, he found skeletons protected by golden breastplates and golden masks. This practice was common throughout the Mid-East and was thought by the ancients to protect deceased loved ones from evil forces. Here we see gold breastplates which were removed from the tomb of King Tut of Egypt. In ancient America, the same practice has been found. These golden breastplates from Old Mexico can be seen today in the Field Museum at Chicago. In America, too, the dead were often buried with golden breastplates or ones made of jade, which the Indians valued more than gold. Death masks made of gold were likewise employed in Mexico. Near Oaxaca was the magnificent city of Monte Alban. From a tomb in this ancient city came this golden death mask, reminiscent of lands across the sea. The inhabitants of the great cities of Mexico were adept astronomers and mathematicians. They were acutely aware of the passage of time, and they arrived in the New World with a calendar so accurate that in a recent experiment it was used to predict with accuracy an eclipse of the moon. Speaking of this ancient, accurate Mexican calendar, the noted historian Bancroft wrote this commentary. It is the use of the vague year of 365 days, composed of equal months and 5 complementary days, equally employed at Thebes, ancient capital of Upper Egypt, and Mexico, a distance of 3,000 leagues apart. The use by the Mexicans of a year of 365 days and a quarter is a proof that it was either borrowed from the Egyptians or that they had a common origin. We have examined a few of the vast number of similarities between the civilizations of the New World and those of the Mediterranean area. Since these similarities cannot be accounted for by the presently popular explanation of Indian origin and development, can they be explained simply as coincidence? Many think not. From these ancient cities of America's past, archaeologists are painstakingly removing the soil and reconstructing the past. With each shovelful of dirt removed, old questions are being answered, and new mysteries and riddles are unfolding. The city of Monte Alban, high on a mountaintop in southern Mexico, is a case in point. Excavation was begun here by Dr. Caso in 1931 to learn of its builders and their way of life. What Dr. Caso discovered here is typical of multitudes of ancient cities in America. Monte Alban had been inhabited not by one, but 3 distinct groups of people, each building upon the ruins of an earlier civilization and borrowing from its culture. In Yucatan, among the Mayas, the same was found to be true. Beneath this perfectly constructed pyramid with its temple of Kukulkan lies another, much older temple of an earlier people who had previously worshipped here. Through a doorway at the base of the main stairway, one can enter this beautiful pyramid and walk up the steps of the older, buried pyramid which lead to the small temple at its crest, a temple which has not felt the warming rays of sunshine for thousands of years. This stratification of 3 culture levels seems almost universal in ancient America: Aztec, Mixtec, Maya, and Inca. Of Peru, A. Hyatt Verrill states,
Excavations have proved that there were 3 distinct civilizations at these cities, the latest Incan, the next older pre-Incan, and the oldest, the unknown immeasurably ancient civilization of the district.
These ancient walls of Peru remain an enigma to this day. Great blocks of stone as much as 30 feet long have been cut into exact shapes to interlock with one another with such perfection that a razor blade cannot be inserted into the joint. Stones weighing 25 tons have been fitted together so perfectly that the best analogy for them is to compare them with grinding glass stoppers to fit into bottles. No engineer today would undertake so demanding a task. All this leading us to wonder at the skill of these ancient architects and the tools at their disposal. Archaeologists have found no iron or steel tools or implements in these ancient ruins, and hence proclaim the work to have been done with hard stone chisels and hammers. We are therefore puzzled when there comes to light in some ancient stone quarry a great slab of rock such as this, which has obviously been cut by some sort of machine. Concerning the question of steel being known and used by the Indians of America, A. Hyatt Verrill gives us this opinion.
No living man, Indian or otherwise, could by any possibility duplicate the simplest of their stone carvings by means of the stone implements we find in conjunction with them. It is not a question of skill, patience, and time. It is a human impossibility. Personally, I feel certain that these people knew and used steel, or at least hardened iron, possibly meteoric iron.
We will have to await further exploration and evidence for a solution to the puzzle posed by the lack of adequate tools available to our ancient builders and artisans of America. This stuccoed figure from an ancient building in Honduras remains a riddle to this day. Similar to reliefs and carvings found elsewhere in Central America from Chiapas to Panama, it confronts the archaeologist with a demand for an adequate explanation, a demand that has not been met to date. Speaking of finds from one of the most ancient sites in Panama, A. Hyatt Verrill, the noted Americanist, discusses such figures as this.
The most astonishing of the idols is one bearing a figure which is so strikingly and obviously elephantine that it cannot be explained away. To my mind, there is no doubt that the people who built this temple and reached such heights of culture in Panama in prehistoric times had either seen elephants, had domesticated some species of mastodon, or were in direct and frequent communication with the Orient.
To be complete, our thinking about early America must also incorporate one of these three alternatives. So far, we have considered simply the works and physical products of these early Americans and the puzzles they bring to mind. What of the people themselves, their traditions and their ideas? Here we are hampered by the zealous and effective efforts of the conquering Spaniards to destroy the history, religion, and thoughts of pre-Columbian America. Fortunately, some of these ardent adventurers, realizing their disservice to history and mankind, endeavored in later years to record the legends and traditions of the people whose great civilization they had brought to destruction. One such historian was the infamous Bishop Diego de Landa. He wrote in his book that old men of Yucatan related to him a story, handed down for generations, of America's first settlers. These had come from the east, across the waters. These voyagers were ones whom God had freed, opening for them 12 roads to the sea. The American student of the Maya, E. H. Thompson, elaborates on this legend. Traditions tell us, and carvings on ancient walls and stone columns sustain them, that unknown ages ago there appeared strange craft at the mouth of what is now known as the Panuco River. In these craft were light-skinned beings, and some of the traditions have it that they were tall of stature and blue-eyed. The archaeologist T. A. Willard, in a book concerning the Maya, writes that an interesting sidelight concerning this tradition is the distinctly Semitic cast of the countenance of some of the ancient sculptures and murals found at Chichen Itza and in other old Maya cities. Looking at the figure carved in stone, can one not envision the model more at home in old Palestine than in the jungles of Guatemala from whence it came? Certainly such a comparison of the pre-Columbian carving from Guatemala with a Jewish scholar of Israel must cause some second thoughts in the minds of those who support the theory of isolated and independent development of the American civilizations. Just as our picture of early America must account for the presence of both Negroid and Semitic countenances, so must it account for the presence of white-skinned people in ancient America. Numerous murals, such as this one from a beautiful Indian temple, show the presence of both dark and light-skinned individuals, sometimes in peaceful attitudes as shown here, and sometimes in battle against one another. Who were these people, and what happened to them? Answers to such questions have been lost in antiquity, but the questions remain and must be answered if we are to know anything of importance about prehistoric America. In their study of the religion and traditions of early American peoples, both Catholic priests of the Spanish conquest and modern archaeologists have been amazed at the parallels that existed between the Old World and the New. Writes Donnelly in his book Mexican Antiquities, "There is scarcely a prominent fact in the opening chapters of the book of Genesis that cannot be duplicated from the legends of the American nations, and scarcely a custom known to the Jews that does not find its counterpart among the people of the New World." Consider just one of the multitude of likenesses one could find. We shall read from the 11th chapter of Genesis about the building of the great ziggurat or step pyramid known as the Tower of Babel. "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth." In America, the greatest of ancient pyramids is here in the valley of Cholula. It is related to this great step pyramid, similar in construction to the great ziggurats of Ur, that we find a parallel to the story just read from Genesis. One writer records the ancient tradition in these words: "After the deluge which destroyed the primeval world, 7 giants survived. One of them, Zelua, then built the great pyramid of Cholula in order to reach heaven. But the gods destroyed the pyramid with fire and confounded the language of the builders." It seems more than coincidental that the setting and tradition should be so similar in all respects, and this is just one of numerous such similarities one finds as he examines the traditions of early Americans. Speaking of the 3 great civilizations in the New World, the Aztec of Mexico, the Mayan of Central America, and the Incan of South America, A. Hyatt Verrill arrives at this conclusion:
It is quite possible, in fact probable, that all 3 of these major American civilizations were offshoots, or I might say the developments, of a single advanced culture.
This position is supported by the great number of cultural similarities found throughout the people of the New World. One of the most intriguing of these is the common belief by all these early tribes in a very special deity represented here as the plumed serpent. The sign of the cross, found in almost all Mexican cultures, was also a symbol for this important and unusual deity. Known to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, to to the Maya as Kukulkan, and to the Inca as Viracocha. This deity predominates the legends and beliefs out of America's past. The Quetzal, as part of his name, was given to him by the Indians, intimating by the bird the swiftness with which he had passed from a distant country to their own. So wrote the scholar Boturini, an early collector of Indian manuscripts. Here, on a panel of the Aztec temple of Quetzalcoatl, are seen indications of the Indian traditions concerning this god. On one side of his symbolic form, you see rippling symbols which represent the sea. At the other side are replicas of Caribbean seashells, leading us to the premise that the land from which he came was beyond the Caribbean, a premise supported by masses of traditions and carvings out of the past. Concerning him, Verrill writes this account.
Probably the best known and most famous of the Aztec gods was the plumed serpent, or Quetzalcoatl. There are many myths and legends connected with Quetzalcoatl, but all agree that he was a white stranger with a flowing beard. Among other things, he prophesied that long after his departure, white strangers would arrive from overseas and would overthrow the Aztec kings and enforce another religion, but that eventually he would return to reestablish the Aztecs and their faith.
Although the Indian traditions and legends concerning Quetzalcoatl agree fairly well as to his arrival from a distant land in the east, his bringing of civilization to America, his healing powers and beneficent teachings, they vary widely as to his departure. One ancient legend tells us that, disappointed by the lack of acceptance of his teachings, Quetzalcoatl returned to the east. Another legend states that he cast himself upon a funeral pyre, after which he wandered for several days in the underworld until the morning star appeared. Then he was resurrected and went to heaven as a god. Still another legend states that he was scourged with thorns and tied upon a cross where he died. After 3 days he arose and ascended into heaven. How familiar this story must have sounded to astonished Spanish priests as they recorded the traditions of a people they had considered to be savages. In this comprehensive mural by the noted Mexican artist Diego Rivera, we see Quetzalcoatl leaving the Indian people of America after having impressed upon them the hope held universally among them of his eventual return to them. Here in the beautiful city of Palenque, where stands the Temple of the Cross, we leave the legends and traditions of its builders to consider one last riddle which has long intrigued and puzzled archaeologists. Of these ancient Maya cities, Herbert Spinden writes, the most brilliant period was from 300 to 600 A.D., after which all these cities appear to have been abandoned to the forest that soon closed over them. What could have happened to a people so strong, so highly civilized and organized? So firmly implemented it was the old empire of the Maya. In his story of the American Indian, Paul Radin presents some of the current thinking concerning this baffling mystery. The years between 472 A.D. and 620 A.D. constitute the most brilliant epoch in Maya civilization. It seems to have come to an end suddenly. An overwhelming catastrophe seems apparently to have swept over all the cities where this civilization had flourished. Some scholars have invoked a tremendous civil war, others a devastating epidemic, and still others social decadence. As yet, the trowel and spade have not brought to light the answer to this great riddle of early America. Indeed, Mexico is a land of contrast, but more than that, it is a land of mystery. To learn more about it and its early inhabitants, an army of archaeologists have explored, excavated and reconstructed its ancient cities. But with every question answered, there comes to light new and perplexing riddles which yet remain to be solved. We have briefly explored a few of these riddles posed by the people of early America. The puzzle of their arrival with civilization already highly developed. The perplexing similarities between American and Mediterranean cultures. The presence of various racial groups known to the early Americans. The intriguing traditions and legends from America's past which sound so familiar to us with our heritage from the Holy Land. The presence of three distinct civilization levels superimposed one above the other. The mysterious and sudden destruction which befell the inhabitants of ancient America. Satisfactory answers and explanations for these puzzling discoveries have proved an enigma to archaeologist and historian. They have sifted through tons of rubble in their search for answers. Numerous hypotheses have been devised to explain the riddles encountered. Volumes have been written, yet the riddles of ancient America remain to challenge us. Of all the volumes that have been written, there is only one that answers all these questions and offers a solution to each of the puzzles that have arisen from research in the field. Strangely, this book came to us upon metal plates stored in a stone box, perhaps similar to this one, through the inspiration of God. It is called the Book of Mormon, and it is the history of these early Americans as they recorded it, preserved it through generations, condensed it, and finally buried it on a New York hillside, that prophecy found in the Holy Bible might be fulfilled. Marvelously, this book brought to us the answers to all these riddles and questions before the questions had been asked, before the great cities of Mexico and Central America were known to exist. This fact had profound influence on one noted archaeologist who had spent a lifetime searching for clues to America's past. Listen to the words of the distinguished A. Hyatt Verrill.
My archaeological studies convince me that the Book of Mormon was inspired, for it contains many archaeological and historical facts which were absolutely unknown at the time it was written.
If you would care to know more about America's early inhabitants, if you would be interested in considering a solution to some of science's most baffling problems, if you would enjoy reading about the fulfillment of numerous Old Testament prophecies, if you have ever wondered about those other people in a different land Christ told his Jewish followers he was also going to visit, we challenge you to take up this book, which the prophet Ezekiel saw in a vision as becoming one with the Bible, and study it carefully. But more than carefully, you are challenged to read this controversial book prayerfully. One of the final writers of this ancient record exhorts you to ask God as you read if these things are not true, and he promises that if you ask sincerely and with faith, God will reveal to you the truth about this book. For what greater test of validity could one ask?